let me know if the Discord is as like a video is updating at all, because when I see it on my thumbnail here, it just has it as a blank picture and not as moving.
Mm.
Or
So,
not as a blank picture, but it just has it as like a picture and it's not moving at all.
yeah, so it says stream pause because you minimize the application. But now it's there.
Yeah. Also, do you want me to update the stream information?
I should have updated it.
Let me refresh my page. Maybe it hasn't updated for me. Nope.
Oh, weird.
So, what do you want to name the stream?
Let's just do fan game follies. Let's look at some video game fan labor.
They made a Legally Blonde musical.
Yes, and it's the what we're going to talk about is why this movie that was made in 2001 that has a musical that was released in 2010 is there's still people making fan videos using that song in 2021 about Genshin Impact. I'm so excited. The first little bit we're gonna look at is like all about like explicitly about LGBTQ stuff, and then the second round of things we're gonna look at is like more like in the network of it, but not explicitly about LGBTQ stuff.
All
This
right.
is exciting.
Stream is updated.
Okay. And we're rolling. We currently have 0 viewers. I would view myself, but then it would explode my computer, so I can't do that. But hello, nobody. And welcome to. Okay, now I see 3. Hey everyone, welcome to a short little fun little episode of Fan Game Follies. Before we even get started, I'm just going to read our land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge that in Milwaukee, we live and work on traditional Potawatomi, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee homelands along the southwest shores of Michigami, which is part of North America's largest system of freshwater lakes, where the Milwaukee, Menominee, and Kinnickinnic rivers meet, and the people of Wisconsin's sovereign Anishinaabe, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Oneida, and Mohican nations remain present. And I think, especially because it is now Earth Day, it's vitally important that we acknowledge that we, as white people, have taken land for many, many, many different purposes, which is not always good. So I think it's important we acknowledge that today.
It's in fact very rarely good.
It's very rarely good. I should say very rarely good. So land acknowledgements are just one little step in the process. Today we are doing something fun. I'm not playing a game this week because I didn't feel like playing a game. I actually just finished a fan game yesterday from Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, and the ending was really weird. So I'm glad we didn't play it. Basically, like, the Zoras were evil and tricked Link, and then they hung him out in the town square. I don't know. It was crazy. Oh, is the stream frozen again?
It does appear to be frozen. Are you getting audio, Kill? Yeah, so here's my recommendation, David, when rolling with Discord like this. Don't minimize any applications, just open new applications, because if you minimize Discord, it'll stop recording the video.
Okay, that might have been what I did. So sorry.
Yeah, I had to play with this for D&DMs, and it's just a mess, so...
Yeah. I will just click on tabs then, rather than actually doing stuff. Like minimizing. But yeah, so I ended that stream, and now I felt like, since there is a conference called Replaying Japan that I'm kind of interested in submitting a lightning talk for about one of the videos we're going to watch today, I thought we could just watch it today and have some fun. So today is going to be all about video game fan labor. So the first thing I want to talk about is so we have 2 kind of general categories that we're going to be watching today. Oh, thank you, Strange Places, for the compliment. I made this overlay myself. I took some assets from the internet and made it. But but there's two kind of categories we're looking at today. So this first one that we're going to be doing about, we are going to be looking at a video, well, two videos really, that are both notorious in fan communities for the style of video they have. Since we're going to be looking at two videos based off of a song from Legally Blonde, I thought it would be a good idea to actually show the video that they're referencing for those people who maybe don't know what the scene is. So Legally Blonde, the movie that came out in 2001, is for some reason really popular in fan communities of video games, which we'll dive into. So there is a musical version of Legally Blonde that came out in the early 2010s. I believe it's 2010, but don't quote me on that. And one of the songs is based off of a scene in the movie where this man is pretending to have a love affair with Elle Woods, the main character. Her client is getting charged for murder, even though she's innocent. And this pool boy is claiming that he had an affair with her to make her look innocent, because he's like getting paid off by somebody. And so they have to prove that he's gay, because he actually is gay. And there's a reason why she knows exactly why he's gay. So we're going to watch the scene from the movie, and then we're going to watch some fan videos that are based off of it. So if you don't like musicals, I'm sorry. Come back in 30 minutes. But we're going to watch this short video. We'll talk about, I think the big thing I want to talk about here is how it's positioning queerness as a set of like signifiers in terms of like bodily signifiers, and then also in terms of actions. And those are two things that are going to appear in these fan vids as well. Okay. Can you see this random woman?
Yes.
Ren. Okay.
Yes. Now, can we hear it is another question.
Oh,
Hopefully
right.
it'll work.
Let me make
Just
sure I'm sharing my audio. Let's try it and let me know if you can hear anything. It should come through right away.
Oh, Paulette, that
We're
is
good.
so great. I told you the Bennett snap is infallible unless the guy is gay or something. I gotta go, bye.
Oh, okay, bye.
Sorry for the potato quality.
Put it into theater mode.
By the way, the stream cannot see it, so you might want to switch your display so that you're not streaming the Discord, you're just streaming the web page.
Okay. Can people see it now? Sorry, everyone, for all of this conflama.
It's only 9 minutes of Conflama, it's fine.
They see.
Okay.
Aziz Light.
Oh, it's not working again.
No, you guys.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
Maybe I have to have both Discord here. Maybe if I have them both like up.
Maybe. Like I said, my recommendation would just be to like what I was doing for the ARG stream was toggling between streaming Discord and streaming my screen.
Okay. Oh,
Just
gotcha.
switching from like turning this display on, turning this display off, and that works not perfectly, but pretty all right.
All right, let's do this. Thank you, Kilm, and everyone else for holding out with me. It's been lots of technical difficulties today, but that is okay. All right.
Yeah, technical difficulties are the spice of life.
Yes. So everybody's going to get to see my wonderful editing skills right now, which is
The
fun.
backstage to the
Yep.
to Serious Play. Wow, gotta go all the way back to Goffman.
Yep. Okay, so this is not going to look pretty, but this is what it is for now on the stream. So sorry about this, everyone. Okay.
Gets complimented on overlay, immediately destroys
Watch
the
this.
overlay.
Did you see it?
See what?
No, maybe you should do it one more time.
Please.
Nikos couldn't have had the affair with Brooke. I just did the Bennett snap in front of him, and nothing. Clearly, he must be gay.
Nikos did leave a share CD in the pool house once.
You want to out this guy on the stand? Oh, that's crazy. You can't build a legal strategy on the bend and snap. We need a defense, not a dance move.
So you think he perjured himself, but you can't prove it. You know, if you're wrong, we look desperate and homophobic.
But if she's right,
And I know I am. There, right there. Look at that tan, well-tended skin. Look at the kid.
Okay, so that starts the song. That was like the little intro to the song.
Okay.
So we are not going to watch it because we're going to end up watching 2 videos that have all the lyrics anyways. But I just wanted to set the mood, set the scene. And something I think that's important to talk about when discussing this video is also that it is deliberately made for gay men. It's well known that the musical and Legally Blonde are a hit in both like straight women and gay men communities. So when they're singing this song about trying to figure out if this guy is gay, this already has kind of the cultural environment of like gay people like this. So when it comes to kind of poking fun at but also like it being invested in these signifiers of what it means to look like, you know, being gay or whatever, it already kind of is thinking about that. So the reason why we watched that slight video is because we have these very weird, I shouldn't say weird, but you wouldn't expect that song that we will eventually hear to actually be big and popular in fan communities. But for the past 4 years or so, there have been multiple fan videos, basically kind of like anime music videos, AMVs, but instead with this musical song about trying to figure out if a guy is gay or European. And what's particularly interesting too is that they happen a lot with US fans of Japanese games, which also brings in a bunch of interesting stuff when it comes to like Orientalism too. So the first one I want to show y'all is one that...
So this has been popping up for like the last 4 years, you said?
Yes.
But and I put it down, and then the updates came out. But the thing that's like absolutely bonkers about this is how fast and loose it's playing with Genshin's like stuff. Mainly, Genshin is attempts to kind of reconfigure different cultural groups in the different cities that are across its country, and they're still like adding them in as time goes on. But the culture of Mondstadt, which is where the majority of these characters are coming from, and the Barbados, who is also Venti, who is also the character who is gay, is kind of like the Wind Archon who rules over this area. Mondstadt is kind of like, I mean, you could bounce it around. It's really a hodgepodge of American and European cultures kind of slammed together into this like freedom-loving place. Now, their conception of freedom is conflated with like playfulness and is put down on, which is interesting because, you know, Genshin's made by MiHoYo, who are Chinese producers. What boggles me is that the text positions it the reverse of what you'd expect, which is the Leeway characters, who are, I think, emblematic of I'm not sure where in China, but I want to say China. Like the Liwayans are the Europeans in this thing, and not the Mondstadt folk or another. And like the French, there's like a French area. I can't remember what it's called. Like there's a lot of other cultures inside of Genshin they could have picked. And also it's just like, yeah, Genshin has a huge queer community, but like I feel like I'm just surprised that they picked Venti and not Kaya, who is, you know, featured there, and you know the long in the fur collar and the slightly darker skin. It would have matched up to the tan skin. Works out well for the song. And also there's definitely some like gay tension going on between Diluc and Kaya in the comics that would have made a lot more sense. So it's just a really weird choice.
The first comment on the video is the Kaya version is he gay or European? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just weird. Like, you know, fan creators can make what they want, obviously, and make the choices that they want to make. It's just like in any other game, these tensions wouldn't necessarily be like readily available, but Genshin is clear that it's playing fast and loose with these cultures, like from the get-go, like textual. And so it's like, why conflate that when you as a creator have that space? I think they just probably really liked Venti, and I'm overreading it. I mean, who doesn't like Venti?
Yeah,
he's great.
They're
great.
Like, I felt like Venti was like one of the characters that everyone wanted, or that everyone had. Yeah,
well, everybody wants them.
Yeah, that could be one of the moving factors in why he was chosen over other characters. But also, like, I have interaction with Genshin through all the people in my free company who play Genshin, and all I know is that someone really wanted Diluc, and then someone really liked Zhang, or Zhang, I think. I don't know. Like, he spent actual money to get him, like a ridiculous amount of money to get him. So it was like hey, okay, those are the only two characters that I know anything about, is because people couldn't get them. But
something that I thought was weird, and this is different from the Fire Emblem one, which only has about 250,000, but I think of the ones I've seen, I think it's the most clean cut. But also the Yusuke one, which is the other one of the most popular ones, it's much more about the actual text of it rather than the fan community behind it. So what was interesting about this one was that there was a lot of fan art and fan labor that was like part of the video. So I don't know if it was as much really like I've seen other versions, like with the Yusuke one or with the Claude one from Fire Emblem Three Houses. And I saw that, you know, they would have like quotes from the you know, the game. They would have things from the game, you know, where like Claude takes your hand and you dance with him in Fire Emblem. And so it was like more of like a textual reading almost, where it's like you were kind of like doing this double game of like lining up like things in the song that related to the character just for fun, but then also like having this other like thrust behind it where it was like, you are also talking about how like these effeminate behaviors are like stereotypically seen as gay, and then like applying them to characters as well as how they appear in the text. And that's also strange too, because right, like our idea of what being effeminate means is different here than it is in Japan, right, or China in this case. So like that also, right, there's a whole bunch of like different signifiers of what's gay and what's not within these games that are produced in Japan and then consumed in the US and then put to the tune of gay or European. Right, but and with those other ones where they're more deliberately looking at the text itself, it seems to be doing a little more work and trying to figure all of that out, whereas this one felt a little more just kind of like extra textual, where it's like, hey, a bunch of queer people like this person, so like let's just make a song about it. At least that's what it feels like to me.
Yeah, and Kilm makes a really good point. And I wasn't sure if it was something I wanted to bring up, but now that Kilm said it in the chat, I think it's worth underscoring that when Venti got released, people were like, is that a boy? Is it a girl? Because Venti resembles the, like, I guess, trope of the trap, right?
Yeah.
Which obviously we can problematize the language or whatever, but that's what colloquially people in that community refer to that sort of image as. And like, I didn't want to say maybe there's a conflation going on where they're just taking gay and replacing it with I don't know what I guess trap. Like
androgynous.
And well, but the goal is not to pin out like, you know, is this person, like, obviously the tension is this a boy or a girl, but it's to resolve that, not to like land in the middle. Which is the point of then, you know, because the trap is well, I don't know. Do I need to define that, or are we okay? Cool.
Yeah,
because it makes me a little uncomfortable to go on about it.
Yeah, of course, we're good.
Yeah, I mean, and that's interesting. It's not like a great thing to see those two things conflated, but
no, but it is interesting, right? Because there's that bit where it's kind of blink you're gonna miss it part where, you know, in the movie or in the musical, the guy who everybody thinks is gay like flirts with a woman, and that's when they all yell like "damn it!" And at that part, it was like a fan drawing where he was kissing like a female character, and like everybody saw that, and then they're like "damn it!" Right. So it is interesting because you do have that cultural discussion about like within the fan community about like, is he a boy, is he a girl, all of the problematizations of that, right? And then with this, it's like taking that conversation and then putting this on top of it, but it also is like somewhat slightly just about sexuality, but then there is all that gender stuff in it too. It makes it really complicated. Yeah. And of course, like if it's a 13-year-old kid who made this, right, who doesn't really know that much about it, right, that adds another layer where you're like, is this a person trying to figure it out? Is this a person just making something because they wanted a bunch of clicks and likes and they know that this is a popular trope to do? That makes it more difficult to figure out what's going on too.
I definitely think it could also be maybe a picture of Genshin, because Genshin, a lot of people have classified it as a gacha game. Gacha games are very much about, I'm gonna say, collecting people, but you know, they're collecting people. You're collecting people who look pretty, and in Genshin they have, you know, certain attributes that people find, like it's wind magic and stuff. That's also good. But a lot of it is, hey, I want this person because he looks really pretty. I have someone who's like, I want this person who's blue because my favorite color is blue, and she's really pretty. She's really pretty. Like, that's one of her main. So I feel like that also might kind of also be a reason why the example we saw of Genshin Impact with this song is a little bit more divorced from the story material because of its genre and the, you know, the general idea of, you know, this person we don't know. That's why maybe the, you know, the trap conversation kind of comes in, is like, well, do I want this person or not? Because, you know, maybe I don't like boys and I wanted to collect all the girls or something like that. Like, maybe that's why it comes in, is because of that people collecting aspect.
Yeah, and it does seem like there is so much already extra textual stuff just in that realm, right? Of like how you like collecting a character versus just like encountering a character is a different relationship to it. to that person
Yeah.
or that individual
Definitely.
or that thing.
Yeah.
Which is also interesting to think about in terms of Pokemon stuff too. We
Well,
won't
yeah,
we won't
and-
get into that.
and, like,
I've
imagine
written
how
a lot
much
about
more-
that.
Imagine how much more complicated that relationship gets when you're not just picking a Pokemon and saying, yeah, I want that one. You're going, oh my god, I have to drop $30 so I can roll 16 times to see if I get the character I want to collect. Like, the value of these characters is through the roof. The MiHoYo knows that, and I can't stand the monetization practices of that game, but it
Or
does.
just-
It's interesting fodder for discussion.
Yeah, I definitely think it's the ability to separate, also like character from story. I know Genshin Impact does have a story, and from what I understand, it has a more fleshed out story than some other gacha games. But
Oh, yeah.
it's still a
Oh,
gacha
yeah.
game. And hey, I want to go through the story with my very specific characters. You might divorce them from the actual like meaning of their character, rather than just being like, hey, I want to have Venti because he's a good character. Kind of like in Fire Emblem, some people min-max, and they're just like, I don't care if Dedue's sad, I'm gonna have Dedue on my party because he's the best person.
Although, for the
He's a
record, Venti
beast.
is like top tier in every sense of the word.
That also brings up an interesting conversation then of I think this is something that comes in with Pokemon too, that I think can be explored more. Probably in because I'm thinking about doing something similar about this phenomenon in my dissertation. And something that I think is interesting about this that maybe separates it from other forms of queer fan labor is the the choice element of like being able to choose who you have on your party in terms of Fire Emblem or Gacha or other Gacha games like or similar to Genshin or Pokemon, right? It's like this ironically is kind of doing a different double articulation of queerness, where it's like you have like the textual thing of like the song and Venti and everybody's like he's gay, but then you also have this weird thing where it's like if you are using the song to talk about the physical and the action, like the physical signifiers and the actions of what makes a gay person, right, then you also have this double thing where it's like you as the person playing the game then are able to articulate your own queerness through your choice of this character, right?
Yeah,
like
the articulation that comes with it being an avatar and not just something that's in your pocket.
Yeah, and I don't know about this game, so I can't say if that blonde-haired guy is the protagonist. But for the Fire Emblem,
yes, at the end, yes, that is the traveler is one of the two protagonists you can choose. There is a female traveler. Whichever one you choose, the other one becomes the antagonist.
Okay, so this fits in perfectly what I was gonna say, which is great. Made me feel smart. So with the Fire Emblem one, with the Yusuke one, and with this one, the people who out the character as gay are all the player avatars. Like in every single one, like it's part of I think it's part of the genre or whatever we want to call it of this AMV, of this style of AMV. But I think that really backs up the argument that part of this is about articulating your own queerness through choice, right? You are saying as the person coming in and assuming the identity of this player avatar. That relationship is very complicated, and lots of people have written about it. But for the sake of saying we're going to assume that role of the avatar, or at the very least, the player has a direct relationship to the avatar in ways they don't with other characters.
I've been playing around. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, I was just gonna say. So by playing as the avatar and then saying like this person who I want on my team is queer, as an articulation of me myself as being a queer person, right? That's a lot of like different layers of queerness then, right? It's not just a queerness of like other people and seeing what other people do and seeing what other people wear, and that is your signifier of identifying other people. It's also of identifying yourself through the actions you make through playing a game. Sorry, my brain's exploding right now.
Such a good cat. Oh
Sorry.
my god. But no, that's really interesting, and I've been playing with Thomas Malby, for anybody in chat who doesn't know, parlaying value, and there's a brief section of parlaying value where Thomas is like, I'm not going to get into avatars, but let me get into avatars, and talks about the kind of social capital relationship between the avatar and as an object, and the avatar as embodiment, right? The avatar doesn't just exist as this signifier of social capital from the exterior. It's also an artifact in some meaningful way that presents, social dynamics by connecting itself to different cultural consensuses, if you will. So, I'm playing with this as a matter of talking about mementos and what mementos mean. But like, from this example and this standpoint, it seems to me that there's another queerness going on where it's not just that the avatar is the embodiment of the self or the embodiment of the projection of the self. It's also, I have Venti. I have spent the time and energy and effort to get Venti. And because of that, that is an articulation of some sort of like experience or expertise or other social capital that, can be analyzed in a more Marxist way compared to the rest of this sort of analysis, right? So there's an economic component that's going into this as well with Genshin that may not be present in other games, but here I think is another mode of like, mode of presentation, just a different kind of culturally situated mode of presentation. Definitely.
This has been a great conversation. I'm so happy we're talking about it. What's also interesting to me is how even within this relatively very niche thing, right? Even though it's viewed by 1.5 million people, right? It's still a relatively niche thing, right? This form of fan labor. It's interesting how the player is positioned in the game is still affecting how this is being interpreted and being articulated, right, as a form of fan labor. And I think it's really interesting that right, we can say like maybe it's not necessarily emerging from the genre itself, but the fact that all of the very popular ones are from JRPGs, or in this case a Genshin game, which is kind of like an RPG, kind of like a gacha game, of.
It's like an RPG game in the way that the weapons don't have stats, but there are weapons.
They have stats.
The people have stats, and that's what you choose.
Right, yeah. The weapons have abilities and like some changes to your stats, and the characters have abilities and changes to your stats, but like on their own they don't mean anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think you point out a very interesting point about these being like JRPGs, and I feel like it might be the way that culturally they don't really they don't approach like queerness or like sexuality in the same way that Western things do, because Western things, there are so many games that go, look, this is Sam Fisher, look, he doesn't have a shirt on, look, he's all muscular, oh, he has a daughter, which means he definitely has a significant other, which means he's definitely masculine, he's hetero, look, it's Sam Fisher. Like, I'm sorry, I just picked Sam Fisher out of my hat, but like there's so many other examples of that where they kind of hyper specify this person, he is a man, he is hetero, or this is a lady and she's a lady, like very much separates that, like tells that story very specifically, so there's no ambiguity. Whereas localization, especially, I remember in Fire Emblem, who were the two characters, Mercedes and
and that green-haired guy.
No, Mercedes and the redhead. Those two girls have, like, in the Japanese version, they actually are like lovers.
Oh,
you see it. Their S rank is like, we're best friends and we're gonna love each other forever and we're gonna hang out forever, and it's super cute. But in the American version, they got rid of that. They're just friends who live together.
Yeah.
Just
wasted away in the sands of time.
Hold on, isn't that like a lesbian trope?
Yes, that is.
Yes,
that's maybe queer. That's even queerer.
Yeah. So, but that's like the thing that, like, that's what. Oh, I might be ad-libbing that just a little bit, but it's like definitely the localization brings in that ambiguity, because they're like, oh well, we don't want to piss off American audiences with queerness.
Yeah.
I don't know. But it's definitely like they leave it more ambiguous in localizations.
Yeah, and it's like right, the double audience of the Chinese or the Japanese player versus the US or the European player, right? The pitfalls of or homophobia exist differently in each of those nations, right? Mm-hmm. Even, the US versus European countries, or like China versus Japan, right? Even within those like relatively geographically close or socio-historical close environments, right? How that is played out is different across those communities. So you do have this. I think part of what makes me interested about this too is like you have this song that is like about stereotypical Europeanness. I would say like mostly like France or Spain is probably what they're thinking of, right?
Italy as well.
Yeah, Italy, right? And it, like that effeminacy, and then like you have that being layered on top of and it's like a tongue-in-cheek kind of song, right? It's like everybody knows he's actually gay, right? And all the straight women and all the gay men that see the movie or the musical know that he's gay, right? And the whole thing doesn't really matter, you know, what he does. Doesn't matter what the actor does, right? The character's gay. But it makes me it's just interesting that you have this like Europeanness of what queerness is, and right, and what we perceive to be effeminate being placed on top of a Japanese or a Chinese character. And I think it's really indicative of how like there's so many questions, and it's so complex in terms of like how fans think about LGBTQ representation and how they in some ways I don't want to say this is like fully orientalization, but I do think there is some like very tenuous relationship between like exoticization and LGBTQ identity. And like that is something I'm really interested in looking into, because I think there's a lot of discussion now about how like in queer theory there shouldn't be any like think something can't be queer unless it is like anti-colonial. And I'm like, well, that sounds nice. That's a great hope that all queer people cannot be aren't colonial, right? But you have this very queer expression of queer identity, all of these layers happening, right? And within those layers, there is a form of like, because this is foreign, right? Because this is a foreign object, even though I'm inserting myself into the narrative, I'm negotiating my own queerness with it. I don't think you can really get away from the fact that socio-historically in the U.S., where these kinds of things are being made, there is an equation of the Far East and Orientalization, and queerness is implicated in that concept of sexuality too.
And you definitely, because like that's kind of like that kind of plays into the quote-unquote, I hate the word trap, the quote-unquote like is it or isn't a guy sort of characters. I'm just gonna go with that. That's a much better option. Like, is it or isn't?
I mean, we could call them androgynous characters.
We call them androgynous
even if
characters.
the point of calling them a trap is specifically to undermine that androgyny.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, like, we're just gonna go with that, because I hate saying trap, because it makes me think of a 2000s rock band.
Yeah, the traps. That's my new
I'm sorry.
band.
There was a bar.
This conversation.
No, there was a bar in Eau Claire called the Mousetrap, and we'd always call it the Trap. So now that's taking me back there too.
All right, but anyway, so like that kind of this idea of queerness and like the orientalization, and like I don't want to say assigning like characters with like, hey, I am adopting this person who I believe has the same sort of identity, like Venti being like, well, it's androgynous, so like I'm going to say whatever I want because we don't know, and I'm going to assign it to my own and pick them in my party. And I totally lost track, but like that, I feel like that Orientalism has some more effect, because there's a lot of like every anime has the like younger 19-year-old. You're pretty sure that they're like 19 because they're portrayed that way, but they also look much younger than that, so you can't actually tell their gender. So like you're kind of like, well, what do I do with this character? And that kind of, people bring that into their own ideas and their own identity, and it is orientalizing because you're like, people adopt that caricature into their processes of understanding media.
Yeah,
that's where I'm going. I'll
it's
finish
a
that.
way of it is a specific delineation of the archetype from its context.
Yes.
And by doing that, you're able to project onto it, but with the context, it wouldn't necessarily elicit the same response. And I think Genshin, I don't mean to like pound the Genshin Impact thing into the ground here, but it is really hot impact pound. I guess that kind of all came together. But what's interesting is like, if we're thinking about Genshin Impact as a cultural export, it is a fascinating thing to like have this discourse going on in concert with, because it is like I don't want to call it like it's a globalist project. It is literally taking the cultures of the world and reconfiguring them in the way that makes sense to the creators of, that are working within the Chinese state. So it is in a lot of ways pro-authoritarian. It is in a lot of ways like the Mondstadt people who are the America archetype are portrayed as drunk and free. And by free they mean lazy. And they don't want to do anything, and you go in and do everything else. And the concept of freedom is it's completely hands off. You can do whatever you want.
Laissez-faire.
Which is,
which leads to people being lazy.
Exactly.
In their rhetoric, right? Not mine.
Yeah.
Theirs.
and so, fans are really bracing for what the next area is going to be, because I can't remember what it's called. Maybe Kilm knows. But it's supposed to be Japan. And China and Japan's relationship have been poor. So, but
I'm just
Inazuma, there you go. So it's going to be interesting. But this is a globalist project that is taking these viewpoints and spreading them out in a way that really previously the only games I can think of that have done that have been like Call of Duty, really, like that are big, huge cultural exports that are very this is the USA.
USA,
but it's coming from a different perspective, and so that Orientalist kind of viewpoint that queer individuals might take in the process of trying to identify, which again, like, is that necessarily a good or bad thing? I don't want to make a moralistic judgment here. But like it's something to keep in mind, and I think it's particularly palpable in a game that is a big cultural export like this.
It's just right, it's part of the network of the signs and how people read them. Right, and the androgynous character in a place like Japan or China, just the cultural. I'm not going to say it's completely devoid from like the U.S. context, because that just all culture affects the other, right? And so like especially when globalization happens for the past 40 years, there's no way you can explicitly say like there has been in no way an effect of Japan and the U.S. in ideas of queerness. They've never intersected ever, right? I'm not claiming that, right? But the androgynous character in something like maybe Yusuke in Persona 5, where he is a man, right, and he's constantly articulated as a man, but he's more androgynous, right, or maybe a more androgynous character in other settings, right, that has its own cultural specificity within a Japanese environment and Japanese context, right? So like when we then put our own readings of that and assume it in our context and put our own thoughts about that just falls into a network of other ways that the U.S. has envisioned sexuality in other spaces and other times and other places. I did not mean to rhyme. Right. Right. So, and so with stuff like, like anti-Asian hate, on the rise and in spaces, particularly spaces that are thought of being as like sex trafficking areas, right? Or even if they're not actually, right? Because they targeted, salons and that kind of stuff that are kind of notorious for that kind of thing, even though it's not necessarily happening in those spaces all the time, right? There is a link between violence and Asian sexualities in the U.S. and like that just has to be part of this conversation. I'm not saying a 13-year-old kid is like whoever made this, right, is single-handedly, destroying all queer people or single-handedly,
but also like
demonizing an entire culture, right? But it's just part of that network of signs and signifiers in the U.S.
Yeah, and it definitely, you get a lot of, and like, I'm trying to word this in a way that doesn't seem super painful and cringy, but like you have this I don't know, I'm just gonna shut up because I don't know what point I'm trying to make, so I'm just gonna be like,
well,
yeah.
I think it reminds me in some ways of, well, okay, I don't think it's as destructive as like otaku, or like not otaku culture and otaku culture, the actual otaku culture stuff I'm not talking about, but the American like fixation on otaku culture,
like the weeaboo otaku.
Yes.
It's that to me strikes similarly, but for different, like with different motivations and different kind of notions behind it. I'm not equating the two, and I think it's important, like on the individual level for queer identified individuals who are identifying with characters to realize that like the embedded signifiers are not necessarily meant to be viewed the way that you're viewing them. And you always have to reckon with both of those like symbolic layers where it's like, I think Therion looks really fucking queer, not meant to be read that way most likely at all. And so like, my reading of that character can't necessarily be the only reading of that character or whatever else. Which I don't know how much that happens in these communities. I'm just assuming that because it's something I have seen in other fan communities, that one dominant reading gets put out and then people bicker over it as opposed to a confluence of readings, that does happen and texts are somewhat co-opted in that way.
I totally...
Oh, sorry, you go.
I totally agree with the way that one person reads a character is not necessarily how it was meant to be read. I played the 3 houses as the Blue Lions, because #Paladin life. And the Blue Lions...
I'm a yellow deer, obviously.
So the Blue Lion... So, like, the Blue Lions storyline has the oh my god, my brain is just blanking on the blondie.
Edelgard?
No.
Dimitri.
I just, like... away in my head, but Dimitri is like several times, like during the story, like I was playing as a male professor, and I was like, there was a ball, and during the ball I'm like out in the gardens wandering about, and Dimitri comes up, he's like, oh, professor, you're out at night, that's awfully late, you should come back to the celebration. And he's like saying this in a way, and I'm sitting here like, I'm very much reading this not the way the character's intended, because the character's supposed to be like, you're my best friend, we're such good comrades, you're my great professor, we should go and celebrate this ball together, but I'm reading it as Dimitri's in love with the professor. And it's just like, I know that that's not what it's meant to be.
You know what's hilarious? is that it reminds me...
I'm sure you like it, though.
I love Claude. I love Claude so much. He's a trickster, and I love that kind of character, so...
You know what that reminds me of, though? It reminds me of the joke from Octopath Traveler where I can't remember her name. Maybe you're closer to it than I am at this point, David, but like... Cyrus's story where this student is like coming on to him and but if only I could get him fired, then I would have more, he would notice me, which is what but like I
JRPG logic.
I just love Cyrus's response to her coming to him and going, oh, I'm so stupid, I should have seen it, you're such a dedicated student, but of course you wanted to spend more time with this learning.
So good.
And I think that, like, you bring up an interesting point. Okay, so this is me not being a weeb, but also being connected to weebs through my FC, because there are several times in my FC that they're like, oh, like, what is your anime type? Are you like a Yandere? Or are you like this person? Or are you like that person?
Okay.
And I'm like, I don't know. And he goes like, oh, well, like, my girlfriend's obviously like a Yandere. I'm like, what are you doing? What are we doing with this? And it's definitely like an orientalization of like, there's these very strict, they're not strict, but like these archetypes that are in like Japanese dating games or in just visual novels. They show up a lot in Japanese role-playing games and that kind of stuff. And they're set archetypes, and you can go and look them up, and you'd be like, this is something that's in Japanese media, but translating in America, not good, I don't think. It's very like...
But... Oh, sorry.
Well, I mean...
No, go ahead, David.
Okay. I was just gonna say, right, I think it's really easy for me as a gay guy to then be like, well, it's just like the straight people, they're crazy and they're weird, right? It's really easy for me. And I think, right, their impact on this is more so, I would say, than like queer fan labor like this, right? But this is still kind of operating within that same network of people who do sexualize say like women in anime, right? I'm not saying that this is the same as like devaluing women, but I am saying that the idea that there can be a sexual articulation in the consumption of these things, right? It exists within that same network. So I think as a gay man who's interested in queer fan labor, I think it would be remiss for me to say that this is somehow like not implicated in some of those same ways or within the same media environment and consumption practice.
And I definitely think that there's got to be some overlap between quote unquote the populace of like straight people indulging in Japanese role-playing games and queer people indulging in Japanese role-playing games, and those that the viewpoints aren't necessarily the same, and they're not playing for the same reasons, of course, and all that kind of stuff. But there is that overlap of interpretation. Like they come from the American culture, maybe they're different. They're in different spheres, but there's like a Venn diagram of people on Twitter mentions and stuff that gets cross-pollinated.
The anime avatar Twitter accounts.
The anime avatar.
And
the
if
convergence of anime avatars and
right, they've grown up to have at least a somewhat similar interpretive framework of it, right? Where they've
definitely.
existed in similar circles, even if they're not owning body pillows, right? But it's still right within the same cultural sphere.
Which isn't to shame anybody who likes
No,
body
definitely not.
pillows.
Definitely not.
But also, like,
but I was just the weeb otaku stereotype of body.
I'm
pillow.
just thinking every time someone says weeb otaku stereotype, I'm like, I just think of yaoi paddles. Because it's just because my brain just goes there. Because I've been to a lot of anime conventions, and they were very prevalent when I was going to anime conventions.
I won't shame anybody for the body pillows,
No,
but if you get the mouse pad with the huge boobs, then like I'm gonna shame you a little. But no, seriously though, I think the other really interesting factor in all of this discussion is that while the fan labor isn't refracted through the lens of localization, everything else is. And so like these types that you're talking about, with Yandere or whatever else, are being refracted through the invisible authorship of localizers, and the game is being refracted through the invisible authorship of localizers. And so there's some question as to how much the culture has already been orientalized in some way by the practices of localizers. Now, I know there are a lot of really, like, this is not to put down localizers in general. I know there's like there are fantastic localizers. I can't remember her name, but whoever did the work on Silent Hill 3 is like the reason that game like rocks so hard and is remembered so much because almost everything is her authorship at the end of the day, or her remix of the pre-existing authorship. But there are localizers who are not necessarily, I imagine are starting to invent these types themselves in a way that maybe isn't necessarily present in the original
and I
text.
definitely think you lose like anything going from one culture language to another culture and language definitely is going to lose something in that localization. Like even if you translate a German like Christmas song Tannenbaum into English, you lose something just from the fact that you're going from German to English. And I definitely think like we had this discussion about the Phoenix Wright translations at some point because they were releasing the original 3 trilogy on the Switch in English, and they had this cartoon of a joke that played off really well in Japanese because it's a play on words, and it just doesn't work in English because those words are not the same. It just like played off like it totally falls flat. And I definitely think there's some aspect of maybe localizers not being prescient or like understanding of possibly, hey, this won't work in English, we need to change it a little bit, compared to like taking shortcuts of, oh well, this person is drawn to be this kind of character, so we're going to lean into that and translate their lines a little bit more into that archetype. Because Japanese anime definitely has those caricatures of this person is the motherly figure, this is how they're drawn, this person is an immature writing person, they're going to be drawn a certain way, that kind of stuff. So I feel like they get leaned into more, and definitely that orientalizing can happen.
And I do think too, right, with something like Genshin in particular that is deliberately made for an international audience, that also just brings up questions, right, of the base production too, right? How are they thinking about fan reaction to certain things, right? How are they maybe I feel like I made this up, but I swear I read it somewhere. About how there is some kind of consideration, specifically with things like JRPGs, where it's like, how are we going to create a game where like the archetypes are able to be understood in both like Japanese and English with relatively little, like, and so like it also comes to mind too. Then it's like, how are the people making it like before the translation thinking about the audience too? And like, how are they creating things to appeal to specific audiences too? I think is another question That would be
And
like probably a whole other chapter in my book just about production practices. Right? But that's
definitely-
something I'm interested in too.
Yeah, and I definitely think you can see the difference in an eye towards localization versus an eye that doesn't really care about it. Like, look at the Yakuza games. The Yakuza games are just unabashedly Yakuza. They don't care if you understand Tokyo. They don't care if you understand what the triads are or what the Yakuza are. They don't care. They're like, nope. We're just gonna make this game. We're gonna have pachinko games in it. We're gonna have claw machines and arcades and karaoke. Like, they do not care about localization in that game. Like, sometimes, like, if you're watching it, you're not quite understanding of the culture of Japan at that time period, as well as just in modern day. I'm like, what? Why are they on a bus shouting to their constituents? I'm so confused. But it's like something totally normal, and that's Yakuza versus something that maybe like Square Enix would produce that's very internationally orientated, being like, how do we cast like voice actors? Because I imagine, like, how do we cast voice actors in Japanese and English that get across the same character but are different? Like, American audiences might, a motherly figure would have a lower voice, whereas in Japanese it might not. I'm not gonna say I do know, I don't know, but like that difference in that minding.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's a difference in. I'm just
Yeah.
laughing at Yakuza now. I love Yakuza. It's such a fantastically weird series. I love it.
Honestly, somebody needs to sit down and do like a media archaeology / interview project with just localizers. Because like I realize there's some push, like there's a panel at Ludo Narracon that's starting tomorrow, by the way. I think if you guys want to, anybody in chat,
I
wants to
have
check out
never
Ludo
even heard
Narracon.
of that, so that would be cool.
It's I think it's put on by Fellow Traveler, and it is a really cool little industry panel thing. There's a panel with just localizers this year, which is pretty cool. But like I'm not really sure if Nora Stevens Heath even appears in the credits for Silent Hill 3. And so, you know, there's some erasure of labor there that comes out of these companies, and where the amount of effort that's really put into translation versus how much people credit it. But like, so, you know, there's an invisible history there of people whose labor has been exploited, and you know, somebody needs to go in and uncover that.
And there's also a difference in, like, looking at. I was trying to watch Gundam Zeta, which is the second Gundam series released in the 80s. And I was like, I could watch the sub or the dub, because the files that I have both. And the dub is absolutely terrible. The dub is like, because it is from, when did the dubs actually happen? 90s? That's when, like, dubbing first started to kind of become prevalent for Gundam, at least. I think. Don't quote me, Gundam fans, but I think it was the 90s. And you have these guys, like, they're just like, they're trying, but they have no idea what they're doing. Because, you know, official translations might not be out, or like they might be like attempts at fan translations and things. And over time, localization has gotten better. So like, there's this media archaeology project of like that erased labor, as well as how has that changed throughout the years. Like, what is DBZ dubbing? Like, looking at the first series of DBZ, how that dub is and how that localization is compared to like Dragon Ball Z Kai, like the newest stuff. Like, is it the same? Is it different?
It's hard to know, because I know that like a lot of Japan, like with the Silent Hill 2 case especially, for Silent Hill 2 there weren't contracts for even the voice actors, you know?
Oh, were they?
Like,
oh, okay.
It's different,
weird.
You know, culturally situated. They're at the time, Japanese studios weren't writing contracts for their voice actors. They were just for, you know, whatever else. There was an assumption with the company, a norm, and you did not violate the norm. You didn't sue the company for additional royalties or anything, right? That just wasn't happening.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then they, you know, got involved with some American foreign first-time voice actors. Guy Seehee is this particular guy I'm thinking of, who is also kind of a piece of shit. But my professional opinion about Guy Seehee. But don't. But on top of that, like you know, he really broke that norm and attempted to, you know, get more money out of the project than he had previously already gotten. And you know, there was no contract. There was no real contract to fall back on, because that's not how the industry worked. It's like the source code issue, right? There, for a long time, companies were like, we're not keeping our source code. Why the fuck would we need that? Nobody wants this shit. And then you get up to the 2000s and it's like, well, shit, man, if we only had the source code for Kingdom Hearts 1, well, then maybe we could do something about remaking it.
It just reminds me of like the id Software guys. You have Rocker Man, and then you have the not Rocker Man. I do not remember their names. You have
John Romero.
You have John Romero, and then the other person. I can't remember.
Carmack,
Carmack.
Yeah.
I was like, you know who I'm talking about. And they did this fantastic thing of releasing the source code to the public. They're like, here's this source code. Like, we've already made our money and our company and revolutionized first-person shooters. You can have the source code. We don't care. And so, it's very different because they purposely released it in the 90s, and they're just like, have this. We don't want. Like, we made our money. Have it. We don't care.
It's a different culture, different expectations.
Different cultures and expectations, all that kind of stuff. So.
Can I show you one more video?
Yes.
Yes.
So I don't know if I might have shown you to this already, Ren. I'm not sure. Are either of you familiar with Danganronpa?
Oh yeah, I have seen this.
It's good.
Yeah, I have indirectly interacted with Danganronpa.
So
AKA, I know it's a weird series.
yes, it's weird, and of course because it's weird, queer people love it. So what we're gonna watch is it's not an explicitly queer thing. I mean, it's Golden Girls, so it is basically explicitly queer, and Danganronpa. But the reason why I love this so much, and it's also, even though it's going to be like 10 years old by the time I ever get anything published, I still want to write about it because I think it is fascinating.
Hey, T.L. Taylor says work on the internet is a historical project, so you go ahead and write that paper.
So I'll be like, yep, this is socio-historically placed. But what I like about this is how I really think this is how I think it's a good example of how I said how many times. The project of queerness, or whatever you want to say, like, right, the identifications of queerness can be within something without, explicit LGBTQ people in it. So what we're gonna watch, in Danganronpa, they're trials, because somebody kills another person and then they have a trial in the series. And so each game has, I think, 6 trials. And it has this like unique blend of like visual novel and like also sometimes you play like little mini games in the trial. And so this person spent a lot of time putting a specific Golden Girls scene where somebody was killed, like in the Golden Girls world. Some guy got killed, and Rue McClanahan's character Blanche is accused of being the murderer. So somebody put this scene of the Golden Girls thing in this overlay of Danganronpa, and there's so many great things, and we're just gonna watch it, and I think something here that I just want to talk about is how like rather than maybe the more overt with the gay or European song about like saying this character is gay, right, you can still kind of have these queer affective things, right, without it being particularly about LGBTQ people. So I'm going to
put it on Discord.
Yes.
Also, your description is like, oh yeah, this person got killed, and then this character got accused of the murder, and I'm like, that is such a Golden Girls plot line. Like, Jesus. Oh man.
Yes. Again, sorry for the potato quality of this stream, but it is what it is. Okay.
Okay, I'm Lieutenant Alvarez, Dade County Homicide, and here's what I got. At around 9:45 last night, this guy went to room 405 carrying champagne ordered by Nesbitt. He was admitted by Blanche Devereaux and discovered the corpse. Now, Miss Devereaux and this dead guy had the only 2 keys. Forensics say that the cause of death was a stab wound inflicted by a steak knife. We know Miss Devereaux had steak for dinner. Given these facts, unless somebody has something else, we got enough to make an arrest.
My, Mr. Officer, I do declare your sweet words could charm the morning dew right off the honeysuckle.
Blanche, not now.
If not now, when?
Blanche Devereaux.
Wait. You haven't established a motive.
You want a motive? I'll give you a motive. That woman gave Kendall her room key. I saw her do it. Her plan was to seduce him to ensure that she would win the job as his assistant. Then she got the other key to the room from that woman there. She rushed up to the room. She tore off her clothes.
That's Velcro, just gives the illusion of it's here.
Okay, I'm gonna stop it here just on this screen because it's so cringy.
Yeah, right in the middle, and like.
Okay. The Sans ex Komeda Uwu. They're Kamaeda is a character in Danganronpa. Right. So there's these little Easter eggs throughout the video that are very cringy but very funny. Also, instead of a monokuma, it's a mono cheesecake, and cheesecake is a Golden Girls thing.
She flung her dress on the bed. She slipped into a negligee and awaited her prey. What she didn't realize was the reason that Kendall went to her room. The reason Kendall ordered the champagne was to let her down easy. He'd already promised the job to me. And the reason he went to her room, rather than having her come to his, was that I was sharing his room. Slut! When Kendall told her the truth, she flew into a jealous rage. She plunged the steak knife into his chest. That tramp murdered my lover!
I'm sorry. Also, I have to destroy this despair is a very Danganronpa line because it's all about hope versus despair. Okay, continuing on.
She flung her dress on the bed. She slipped into a negligee and awaited her prey.
The hotel security chief cordoned off the room. So the only people who saw the room after the murder, other than you and your staff, were the waiter, the security chief, and the four of us.
So
when Miss McGlynn was reconstructing the murder scene, she described Blanche's dress being slung over the bed.
it was. I saw it.
But Miss McGlynn could only have seen it if she'd been there prior to the murder. I think I see now how it happened. Last evening at dinner, when Miss McGlynn saw Blanche give Kendall Nesbitt her key, she was furious. She dropped a steak knife into her purse.
Big deal. I took a whole place.
Not now, Ma! And when she felt that she wouldn't be missed, she slipped out of the dining room and headed upstairs. Kendall had let himself into Blanche's room while she was in the shower and was making himself comfortable when there was a knock at the door. Thinking it was the champagne, he opened the door. Posey was there. She accused him of two-timing. He denied it. Posey pulled out a steak knife, plunged it into his chest, and left the room before Blanche could discover her. Jealous rage was the motive, all right, but Blanche wasn't the murderer. There's your murderer, Posey McGlynn.
Well, Miss McGlynn, what do you have to say now?
Dorothy Spornak, you've stuck your nose in for the last time.
First of all, I love every single thing about this, so if anybody in chat says anything bad about it, you're being blocked from watching any more Serious Play shenanigans ever.
There are subscribers in the chat. They're giving us money. We don't know how to do it.
This video is perfection. Okay, this is yes.
Why?
So Cricket GGC. Yes. So at the end, when they were doing like the screenshots of like, you know, she went to his room and you know she stabbed him. That is based off of in the game, like when you figure out who the murderer is, you recreate it through like a comic book style thing where you like put pictures into specific places. So what I like about this is how the person who made it spent a lot of time and effort on it, obviously. But I think they do a lot of cool work in terms of like molding like narrative, and how the narrative in like a game like Danganronpa is like kind of, you know, cut up, and it's a game, and like it is this weird mix between like a straightforward narrative and like gamic aspects of it. And I think like by repeating certain scenes, by cutting to like different scenes to make it look like it belonged in the Danganronpa game, I think it does this cool thing where it like is mixing up how narratives are told in like each thing, which I think is cool.
Mm-hmm.
And Hardsell, I'm not gatekeeping you. I just won't let you watch me unless you agree with everything I say.
Oh, I
it's the Rashomon thing, right? Like, I'm not going to give you just the story. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you many stories, and it is your job as the viewer to try and figure out which of those perspectives is the correct one. Now, of course, the difference is that I think the point of Rashomon is not that there is a correct perspective, but that all perspectives are inherently flawed. Whereas in this case, you really are trying to get at some sort of objective truth, or at least a truth that's good enough for you to make some sort of action on it. I want to just underscore that, like, from an editing perspective, that's a lot of work. Also, oh my god,
kitty.
that is wow.
I'm sorry.
Is he going out the window?
Oh no, he has a little windowsill here.
Oh,
He
okay.
has a little
I
window
thought
shelf
like...
that he sits on.
I thought it was like
It's
open.
It's like a lot of labor. Like, you have to, somebody had to go in, and I assume it's all like digital green screens, essentially. Like they've gone and made these files that you either the person either downloaded and then situated the footage within, or they went and made them themselves, which is even harder. And they had to mix the sound together so that everything didn't overlap too much, and they had to write the text to make sure it was the correct font, and like all of those things. I mean, that's probably like, I mean, I don't even know how to estimate how much time it took to make that meme. That is a genuinely impressive little project.
Yeah, and right, it's taking these two like not canonically, these two queer games, or the queer game, the queer TV show, and these two huge niche but also huge, you know, queer fan communities, and like mashing them up together. And you do see like on TikTok or on YouTube, on Twitter, you do see a lot of those, like, you know, if blah 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 was a Danganronpa trial, like that itself is a style of meme that happens. Like one of the videos next to it was if Megamind, but it was Megamind, but it's a Danganronpa trial. Right, but this shit post, first of all, it has 750,000 views. Most of them were probably me. But you know, it also, I think, it taps into some of those affective things, in terms of like the two queer views of these two things are kind of like coming together.
Yeah, it's interesting because like it is kind of the, I don't know. I want to say it's almost the reverse of the the way it's layered in is almost reversed what the previous one is, right? Like for the other one, it's let's build a narrative around the story, around the song, and then place the characters to act out the narrative. Whereas in this case, it's let's take this pre-existing footage and assemble a textual layer that is above it, some sort of like text that I'm acting through the game, right? Like the game menus, all that stuff that I wouldn't call it paratext. I would call it something between like paratext and like kind of a narrative layer, if you will, or narrator layer. Yeah. And assemble that, slap it in above that source material and have it work that way, which just implies to me that the relationship between Danganronpa and the creator in this is different than it is in with the relationship between Genshin Impact and the creator with the other piece of fan labor.
Yeah, it's definitely like a love of the game format itself, like in the fact it's like I really like how Danganronpa plays, and I just want more Danganronpa, or to put things into Danganronpa, or like, because I see that with like Phoenix Wright, where it's like, well, this, but Phoenix Wright, it's using it's like you can see the fandom coming, just the fandom coming through, where you're like, I like how this game operates, and I want to put it over here in this other media that I really like as well. So we're gonna see how it goes.
I want to write. There's this series of Phoenix Wright meme videos where it's
I love those.
where it's like debates from like Tumblr or Reddit or something, and it like it puts it into, and I'm like, this is a cool little project of like internet history. Like I literally think this is like it's a history of the internet in a meme format, which is fan labor, and I'm like, I want to write about this. I'm gonna find a way to write about that.
Objection lol, they're really good.
Objection.lol, yeah.
Well, kind of, it really just is that bridging of the two fandoms of the meme culture as well as just really enjoying Phoenix Wright, the game, its format, and like being like, well, I want to make really poor faith lawyer arguments, so let's do it.
That's what Phoenix Wright is, right? Poor bad faith lawyer arguments sim.
I mean, to be fair, like, people who go to law school was like, yeah, Phoenix Wright makes no sense, but also it's a great game, so we're just gonna go with it.
Yeah, so who cares?
Yeah, who cares?
Right, like, even dramas like, Law and Order, right? That's not how trials work either. Right, but it's trying to, make it look
I would
like
like
it
to
is.
bring in this witness that is not in the docket, that the defense has not seen or understood or gotten any of the evidence for, but hey, he's here, and I'm calling him to the stand.
Yeah.
Something
else that I think is interesting too is I think something like Ren had pointed out, right? It's a little different from the first fan labor vid, and that like I think to me this feels like there were two things that like existed separately, and then someone noticed like, oh, like this scene where Dorothy is like explaining bit by bit how this like murder played out is very similar to how in Danganronpa they do the same thing, right? So I think what's interesting is you have this fan labor where they see two like seemingly disparate objects, right, that have very different they're published in very different times, they're about very different things, their audiences are very different ages, right? But you have someone who has one foot in each of those environments and saw a connection between the two, and then you have a lot of people who view it and love seeing that connection, right? And so I don't know, like this one I don't have as much of a theoretical framework behind how I'm thinking about it, but I just think it's cool how there are these two like big queer texts that are being put together in such an effective way, and I feel like there's got to be something cool about that at some point that I can write.
I would love to see that. I also want to see like Murder, She Wrote in the style of Danganronpa. 'Cause it's just, Also, fun fact, I learned this while I was in Germany and I was on German YouTube. Murder, She Wrote in German, the title is Mord ist ihr Hobby, which translates directly to murder is her hobby. Like, yeah, sure, that's what Murder She Wrote. Murder is her hobby, same thing. So that just goes back to the localization. I just thought it was hilarious. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
No, one of the interesting things about this idea that like, oh, these are coming from different places or they're enacting different things. It's kind of one of that. So in much the history or much the legacy of the Marshall McLuhan, let me throw out some good ideas and then some half-baked ideas that maybe somebody can make good later. Remediation by Bolter and Grushin do this very much the same thing in some places. Which I don't know, maybe that just gets me kicked out of this MA program because Richard Grushin's here. But no,
we're taking his class next semester, so.
Oh my God, you're right. All right, delete the VOD, everyone. Scrub this from the web.
It's probably gonna get kicked out anyways because we have already had 2 copyrighted songs played. The Danganronpa music and the Legally Blonde.
Yeah.
So this what's interesting about this is that there is a section of remediation where they talk about different configurations of like what can remediation do for people, right? It can, I think the lines are, it can reform, it can I'm trying to pull it up so I can find it because they're really like not. There's not much more than like the words, you know. It's remediation as a meditation on mediation, remediation as the inseparability of reality and mediation, and then remediation as reform, which is I think the most interesting one of the three. But you know, sure, it can comment on media forms or whatever, but like, what does it mean to reform? And like, I think there's something to this idea that if we can build out a technique like remediation, then as an effect, it has different outputs depending on how it's applied. But like, is to reform, you know, something to the effect of taking two distant ideas, slamming them together, and eliciting some sort of truth or some sort of like configuration out of that, a la collage? Is reform something else because they're really vague about it? I don't know, but like if we're thinking about theoretical underpinnings to this, that is the direction I would think to go. Is you know, sure, you've got remediation happening. Any first-year master's student in digital media should be able to point and say that's remediation. Great. Why is it happening? Well, maybe we can expand on these ideas that Bolter and Grusin, you know, lay out in a half-baked way.
I definitely think it's like applying. I don't want to say participatory culture. I don't have a specific definition of participatory culture, but I just have this feeling that it's participatory culture.
There's no explicit definition of participatory culture.
There is not.
This,
People are arguing
so
about it.
Say that it's participatory culture. Oh, good. But no, you definitely see the fandom, these two different disparate fandoms that this person is a part of, just get smooshed together to make his own cultural product. Like, hey, Golden Girls is this TV show from the 90s and late 80s, early 90s, and Danganronpa's from like the last decade. Like, we're just gonna and make something new and see what happens. And I definitely think like meme culture, internet culture is just this churning of, well, I want to make memes too, so I'm going to spend hours of my day to make this overlay, and then I'm going to go get a rip of the Golden Girls and put it under my overlay and edit it all together. Like, it's this very like participating in the articulation of these fandoms, and you can tell that this person loves Golden Girls and loves Danganronpa. Like,
I was gonna say, I think part of something that's interesting is how the pacing of it is not. It's not you know, it's not like, oh, let's put a Golden Girls story in a Danganronpa format. Like, that is what's happening. But the pacing and how they did it is that it is a very mixture of the two, where you do have. So what happens in Danganronpa is during a nonstop debate, there's like a bunch of characters that all say different things, and you have to shoot a bullet at like the one thing you want to disagree with. The truth bullet.
Because bullets are great in courtrooms, I hear. They go well.
And then sometimes you can agree with things, but in this case, we'll just talk about the disagreeing. Right, so you shoot the bullet at things you disagree with, and what you can do with during the trial when everybody's talking, you can slow it down or you can speed it up, kind of like a VCR. Remediation in its own right. But basically, if you go all the way to the end of you know, like the 8 people who say something about this particular part of the trial, and you didn't shoot a truth bullet at the right thing, it just restarts again. Right? So it gives you the opportunity to keep doing it again and again. And so in this thing, right, there we see that happen once, where, you know, Dorothy is like, I need to fix this despair for everyone. Right, and then it goes back to the beginning of that series of lines that Posey McGlynn reads, right, where she says she flung her dress was on the bed, right, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It repeats just like it does in Danganronpa. And then later you have a joke that when Dorothy is recreating the scene, right, in Danganronpa, it's just a straight shot all the way through. There is no like intermingling. Nobody else says anything while you're explaining how the murder happened. But in order to like make it more authentic to the Golden Girls story, they have this little interstitial where Dorothy's mom comes in, Sophia, and she says, "Big deal, I took a whole place set." And it's this great joke, right? And so like they also pause it, the music stops completely, and you're like partially into like the Golden Girls pacing of the scene, right? So you have this interesting thing where the pacing of it is like interlaid with each other, and there is no like it basically constructs this thing where it's not like the pacing is all this and the narrative is all that, or the narrative is all this and the pacing is all this, right?
Yeah.
It kind of really, like, if you want to say reform in the remediation way, right, it really brings to the forefront. And I think by having just a couple of times where those little bits stick out, where the dialogue recurs again, or when Sophia makes the little wisecrack, right, and everybody laughs about it in the studio audience, it's really trying to say, like, affectively, what is something that the creator of this really finds affectively pleasing or enjoyable about these two different experiences, and by putting it together, you can really then highlight these are the different elements of these two things that I really enjoy.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely different than, say, like, remixing. I know we talked a lot about remixing. I know this.
Yeah.
but like I feel like the spirit of maybe the reform that we're talking about, or like the spirit of the thing, is both objects are relatively intact but kind of like interlaced with each other. Whereas like a remix is, you're taking two things that actually have to go together, because like if we're doing it in like a music context, you're like, well, the lyrics have to be a certain beat pattern to go over this other beat pattern or something like that, or this character has to make sense to go over to this different world or something. And so I feel like it's remixing, sometimes remixing takes out the context of certain things. So like, I want to put Snake in Lord of the Rings. How would this work? Well, I'm going to take Snake out of the Harry Potter world and throw him in the Lord of the Rings and really kind of ignore all of the things of Harry Potter. Like, and that's kind of like a remixing, like, it's one pieces of context get kind of like left at the wayside to make this whole product. Whereas what we're talking about here is like both products are intact. They just kind of come together in this magical flower thing.
Yeah, it's interesting in insofar as, like, when you're thinking about the choices that are made to align or disalign certain things, right? Like, there are like things that have to align. Like, for this to work, you can't just throw it over. The format can't just be thrown over anything. It needs to be thrown over a debate of some sort, right?
Yeah.
So there are resonances that have to occur.
Yeah.
But it's also not like a YouTube poop, right? Where it's a remix, and the point is, let's create as much discord as possible, right? Like, let's make this funny by exaggerating the editing style, by undermining the fidelity, and like doing all these things that you would never see in any other format.
Deep fried
YouTube
memes.
poops YouTube poops and deep fried memes are fascinating, and I don't know how much work has been done on them, but like, whoever is how they're doing it.
There's a CFP about meme culture out there if people are interested.
Good stuff. But I think it's interesting. I think, like, I go back to collage and the ideas of like what is collage and what constitutes collage, and I don't think I would go so far as to call this collage, but I do think that, like, there is something adjacent to collage that's happening here, which I know is a form of remix and also a form of remediation, but like, all these things exist.
Bricolage.
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 Savoir
I have
faire.
no idea. Like, people talk about bricolage. I'm like, I think I know what this means, but I also have no idea.
I just read this de Soto and I don't know. So
I always kind of understood it as like bits and pieces being incorporated into a whole.
Yeah, I think
like it's kind of similar.
I think de Soto literally says like making do / bricolage. Like that's how he says it. Yeah, and I do. It's like, it is that, but it is kind of that, but it also isn't, right? Because it's not making do with what you have, right? It's a little more about like deliberately choosing two texts and kind of, I guess that is kind of like collage, right? But it's not necessarily like, I don't know.
I feel like collage is kind of, I don't know, collage, like when I think of making a collage, like I used to make collages in Paint, where I would just like, I'd make Venom collages. It was a long time ago. I would just get Venom pictures and put them all together. But they all had like a theme. And collages are like, I'm going to, make a mood board for what celebrity fashion is. So they cut out all these pictures of celebrity fashion or like wedding dresses and that kind of stuff. I feel like there's a central theme to collages.
Yeah.
Whereas this one is like, I'm taking these two different things and smooshing them together.
Well, there is like a central theme going on there. You know?
Yeah, there is like debate and stuff.
It's the conflict, the want to get to the truth. It's just there's a clashing of tones between the hyper seriousness of, and in some ways, like, is it meant to be taken seriously? No, but all the signifiers are like really serious in Danganronpa, and then you've got the Golden Girls, which is like deliberately meant to be taken not seriously, but when it's placed in concert with this thing that is hyper serious, it seems like the serious thing.
Right, and at the end, and at the end, Posey takes out the gun and tries to shoot Dorothy, right?
Yeah.
And like everybody knows in the episode that everybody's fine, right? But the way it's cut, I wonder if part of it is kind of like pointing out kind of the inherent ridiculousness of this plot, like within Golden Girls, where it's like this is kind of like a really weird episode of Golden Girls.
Well, like, when I was watching, like when you said that was a Golden Girls thing, like okay, and then I was like watching it on the video, and I'm sitting here like this just sounds like Murder She Wrote, which is redonkulous. It's like Murder She Wrote is always somewhat of a twist. Like, oh, it was his limo driver. How do you know that? It's like, well, I just happened to be standing somewhere and I saw the whole thing. And it's like, wait, what the hell? Or like. But it's not quite like Columbo.
Is it called the one with where the woman has dreams and then she like wakes up next day and she's like, I know what happened. That show is always like.
Murder She Wrote is so campy. The other one that I was think this would be hilarious as Danganronpa is Columbo, because Columbo are like hour-and-a-half episodes of Columbo bumbling about. Because that's what Columbo's whole shtick. He's like, I'm an idiot, I'm gonna bumble about. And then at the very end, he just goes, now, Sonny, you're the actual murderer. And you're like, how did you get that, you stupid old detective? He goes, well, you thought I was stupid. Adjust hat. Here's the story. So, Columbo's a treat. If anyone wants to watch Columbo and has the effort to watch Columbo, watch Columbo. Oh, it's so bad.
I remember hearing about it in my Masterpiece Mystery year, where that's all I watched was whatever appeared on PBS Masterpiece Mystery.
Yeah, Laura Linney.
The biggest crime that ever got broadcast on that was Sherlock.
Which
I think broadcasting Sherlock under the header of you know the one.
The new one.
The new one. The Moffat one. The one that's just called Sherlock.
So the BBC one.
The BBC one.
Okay, because I would like to tell, during the production of Sherlock, there have been 2 other Sherlock Holmes IPs released.
Yeah,
Elementary and the Robert Downey Jr. movies. Yeah. Like, let's...
And there was that new Sherlock and Holmes movie with Will Ferrell that was really terrible.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
And when you said PBS Masterpieces, I was like, oh, maybe they're showing like the 1960s, 1950s, 70s Sherlock Holmes, which is like widely acclaimed to be a really good show, but very dated. But like, I was like, maybe.
I wish my dad had a box set of like 6 of the old Sherlock. Like, there are a ton of Sherlock Holmes ones, but I think they were the ones you're talking about, and they're like pretty good.
Some of them, like most of them, are colorized, but like early TV color. So that's why I was like 60s, 50s, 60s.
Yeah, but like no, they were putting out Moffat under the banner of Masterpiece, and I was like, oh man, this is a sin. Looking back on it, they sure did do that.
Yeah, I saw a meme and it said, never forget that in 2013 Tumblr convinced you these 2 men were attractive, and it was Benedict Cumberbatch and that not Matt Walsh, what's his name, Matt something, who was the doctor, Matt Smith. And like, never forget Tumblr convinced you these 2 men were attractive, and I'm like,
Matt Smith's
you know what?
Not unattractive. I think Cumberbatch.
They're acquired tastes. I just like the meme.
They're acquired tastes, but Cumberbatch has a very distinct look, so he's a good actor. But I don't think like people would be like, wow, he's like 2020 most hottest bachelors. He just has he's like Christopher Lee. He's like Christopher Lee. Christopher Lee,
yes,
you know, in his heyday was not the most handsome man, but man, could he play Dracula or anything he wanted to a T.
You know, it's really like I really think like this is what serious play needs, is us talking about the attractiveness of
But like that is fan labor to convince
it is fan labor.
It's Sherlock Holmes.
It's within the purview of my show that I can make fun of Matt Smith and Benedict Cumberbatch.
But Matt Smith,
do we want to make like a tier list?
If we talk about, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
Hardtail asks, can we talk about DashCon? So
no.
It would be interesting. I'm sure there had been like postmortems on it. I don't know if there's been an academic postmortem on it. That would be interesting.
I don't think there's been an academic postmortem. I've watched. Me and Ren have discussed the Internet Historian, but I watched the Internet Historian DashCon video. But like, there's another one from a British YouTuber who covers like Kickstarter scams, like Indiegogo. He also talked about DashCon. So, who else? I think I watched another video about DashCon. It was one of those things where I'm like, I'm fascinated by this train wreck that happened like 7 years ago at this point.
But I think it is something that's interesting, right? Because with a lot of this fan labor stuff, there is some of it. The Danganronpa one is like very clearly articulated. Like that is a skilled. Hey, kitty.
Sorry, my
that is a skilled right. Whoever did that like spent a lot of time and effort and made it really, really well. The Genshin Impact one is interesting because it kind of almost is a train wreck, but like that's part of the appeal behind it, right? Like that it is kind of like a train wreck. Like things aren't they're JPEGs instead of PNGs, right? They're really poorly. What? Right? It's like oh, this really happened. Like Venti kissed this woman, right? But it's a fan drawing that's like has a white background, right? So it's like the point of it isn't to be immersive. Whereas like with something like this one that we just watched, right? The point is to make it feel like this is something that exists within the realms of either of these IPs.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas the Venti one is more just like let's just kind of throw everything at the wall and see.
Yeah. Well,
and
like
hodgepodge.
It kind of harkens back to like differences in AMV styles. Like for me, the best AMVs I ever watched, I will send it to you guys because I think David will love it. There's one called Isaac is a Barbie girl where Curse of Darkness, Isaac, who's this very red hair, shirtless, he wears leather boots, very, very character. He's a very interesting character in Castlevania, and he sings "I'm a Barbie Girl" and they lip sync it to. It's hilarious. Whereas like other AMVs that are like, I'm just gonna throw a bunch of like still images of this one anime I like and hope you guys watch it. Like this is the only reason why you're watching 1,000 Foot Crutch movies, so whatever.
What's really interesting, I think, about early anime AMVs is that they have an alignment with early like film to television stuff that we've been talking about in Michael Newman's class. Specifically, YouTube's early format was what, like 480p and like. Was it 4x4 or 4x3? 4x3.
4x3 TV, literally TV.
Yeah, so you shows that were shooting where you have footage in a larger or images in a larger size format. You had to scan and pan, and that means you're inherently changing the way that the relationship of the music video is to the rest of the things. I think that technique has stayed in AMVs as a way of drawing focus to particular things in a way that it just doesn't in other things. Like nobody's scanning and panning in their damn vlogs.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it's
unless they're cooking.
Unless they're cooking,
yeah.
And I definitely think it's one of those like AMVs are so weird, and they're like unfortunately a largely dead community at this point because they just can't exist on YouTube. Good job, YouTube. You got rid of AMVs.
Well, I would say, but like the gay European thing, that's kind of like an AMV.
That is kind of like it is the child of AMVs.
Yes.
So good on them. But like AMVs
the rancid
are
fruit.
Weird. Yeah. Like AMVs have such like a weird. Like they're such good fan labor. Like they're such like this is fan labor. Like this is inherently someone picking a song and going through and finding all the cool clips of the show they like and putting it together. Like it's like that. It's like a remix. The only problem is AMVs, wholesale just use the song and that's copyrighted.
What are you talking about? That's not a problem. We should watch AMVs on Serious Play. If we get enough different copyrighted material in a stream, then they can't take us down because a bunch of companies keep claiming other companies' material.
Yeah.
What is it called? It's called the copyright deadlock. That's right. Invented by one James Stephanie Sterling.
Oh, you should be like, well, I'm gonna play something
She's
for the
always on the
Universal
case.
Music Group. I'm gonna play something for Warner Bros. I'm gonna throw a little Disney in there and see who claims it. It'll be Universal. 100% Universal claim it right out of the gate. But yeah, AMVs are so weird. They're fantastic. I love them. We made AMVs as kids, like everyone.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think to talk about it with this show in particular, because obviously the show is dedicated to fan games and that kind of work too. But I do think there is so much connection between game production, indie game production, fan labor, et cetera, right? It really, like, somebody who makes a Pokemon fan game, it has precarious labor, but if they get hired by Pokemon, then it's not precarious labor.
Yeah.
Right, but like maybe the amount of effort and the things they're doing are very similar. So I think it's interesting to think about fan labor and fan game production just in concert with other forms of game production, and to think about like the continuums between all of these things, right? And that's why I like looking at videos like these. I think like the Genshin Impact one is I love it because it's so bad. Whereas the Danganronpa one, I love it because it's so good, right? But I think these are all things that are part of they're part of all of the networks of things that people do when they create things, either professionally or fan wise.
Like fan wise, like I always think, because I would like to look at like content creators, so like fan art and like that fostering of, hey, you drew me something, you took time to draw this, and now I'm going to shout you out and like, show it in a video or something. It's like, is that like the culmination of the labor? Is that the end product? Like you want to be recognized by your favorite person, or are you just doing this because you want
to?
What's
the relationship there?
And it's also like, how is the like all these different articulations of somebody really liking a series, or seeing like as an LGBTQ character, how does that then go on to affect like the actual production of it, right? Like if it's this huge network online, that then affects things in production, so that's when you get shitty stuff like the Supernatural ending. I was not a Super Hulakian, so I did not watch Supernatural, right? But you have that one guy who like what is his name?
You know this one guy, Castrius?
Yeah,
Castiel.
And he's like, I love you, right? And then he dies, right? And so it's like, that's a very clear indication where it's like, the creators of the show know there are a bunch of gay people and a bunch of like lesbians and queer people and right, all different kinds of LGBTQ plus people who like the show and who ship these two characters, so they're gonna have this very shitty little insert into it, right? But that then goes on to affect the production of it.
Yeah. Also, like Legend of Korra was like, I don't want to say the first instance, but or like one of the first big instances of people shipping two characters together, and then the creators going, well, if you want her to be a lesbian, well, I guess we'll try. Like, we'll try to see if that worked. And it ended up, like, people were really happy with the ending in that case, but it was very clear that the production went, oh, I see what Tumblr's doing. Maybe we should do that. Like, it was definitely impacted by that. And I don't think people say Korra ends poorly. My friend who's a big Avatar fan might say otherwise, but but like it was not regarded as like, wow, this ended terribly. So it definitely affects it.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's the kind of emergent narratives that start cropping up and in like an interesting way, divorced from what I traditionally you think of an emergent narrative as part of a network narrative or network's narrative, right? Where the idea is that there's distributed content and then people fill in the gaps and that's what becomes emergent. It's really not what's going on here, I don't think. I think that's kind of taking a structure and trying to map it onto something that doesn't fit. There is emergence, but whatever's going on, I don't think can be rightly called a networked narrative. But you see it in Voltron. You see it in a lot of like animated stuff that like aesthetically works to what Tumblr is going to enjoy. Or was going to enjoy, because Tumblr's a dead site now that you can't post NSFW content on it. But like, rest in peace. They made this decision, and then people were using Tumblr for porn, and now people don't use Tumblr anymore. Not as much.
When Twitter bans porn, it's going out too.
Yeah, I agree.
Everyone's just gonna congregate on Reddit. I don't know, actually. I have no idea. No.
Well, I think some of those communities did move over to subreddits, but like, I don't know if there's a real. I think the closest thing that has like Tumblr-like qualities is probably TikTok, in terms of its community.
In terms of community, in terms of like affordances and what you
it's a
do
very
with the
different
app,
media content.
it's different.
Yeah.
That gets into affordances and differences in platforms.
Yeah, but there's an interesting thing that I think happens when you're trying to decide whether or not, like, say you're a creator and you're sitting on, a property, and maybe you're making, I don't know, a new Star Wars movie, and you're sitting there and thinking, do I play this to the community? Do I write my story adjacent to the community, in the sense of like, I'm not going to look at what they're thinking, I'm just going to write my story, and if some stuff crops up, it crops up. Mm-hmm. Or do I specifically say, I know better than what the audience wants, and I write my thing, right? Yeah. There's an interesting relationship from the standpoint of community authorship and the pressures of community authorship on the content. Because I'm not going to be the one to say that that a skilled author who has spent a lot of time practicing the craft doesn't know what they're doing, but I am going to be the one to say that wholly discounting what the fans think of your story is a pretty major mistake in a digital age.
And I definitely think it can go either way. You can either fan labor. God. Sorry.
Maybe Star Wars was like the example to hit here, actually.
Star Wars is such a fascinating case, because Star Wars is a case of fan labor, like, petrifying the story creators. And the fact that they, like, the reception of Force Awakens, I feel like just fucked with what they were going with. Not in the other two movies also just screwed them over in being bad, but, like, the fact that they were like, we're gonna make New Hope, except slightly different, and try to go a different way, just made everyone really angry that they just remade New Hope, even though A New Hope isn't, like, pardon my French, not very revolutionary from a story structural standpoint. It's just the hero's journey, and it's just going that way. Like, okay, cool. So, like, remaking, so they're like, well, it'll please fans, because it'll be A New Hope, except slightly different. But no, it pissed off fans. So then, like, well, I'm gonna go a different direction and make it different, and then everyone's like, well, why? It's not Star Wars because it's so different. Like, that's how I interpreted it. It's this fan labor kind of like stifling. It's and that's also corporate intervention, is Disney being like, well, you have to please the fans because we need to sell mainline products. And so it's like, what do I do? I feel bad.
Got so many different fan communities under their umbrella because they're this huge media conglomerate.
Oh yeah.
Like, there's also this question of like, what fans are you talking about?
Yeah.
It's easy
there's so
to
many different
identify
audiences.
that in the Sherlock case, who they were pinning things towards. It makes perfect sense. Or in the case of Supernatural, which really fostered that community. But with Star Wars, like, if they were writing to the fans in the what's it called? Not the Last Jedi. Was there a group of fans that were less vocal they were writing to? Because they clearly weren't writing to the hardcore purists.
Well, also, like, Disney... All Disney needed to do, realistically, to make fans happy, like hardcore Star Wars fans, is to just look at...
Jar Jar Binks back.
No, look at hundreds of books, LucasArts affiliated books that were written. There's hundreds. There's like over 100 of them. And go, hey, we're gonna pick 3 of these and just make them into movies. And bada bing, bada boom. Bueno. But because Disney went, no books, no more, they screwed themselves. They buried, as soon as, like, I had friends who were really like, oh my god, LucasArts is by Disney, they're gonna make a new trilogy, this is fantastic, and then Disney made all of the books uncanon. And they went, oh, well, this is just not going to go well. Immediately, because they just wrote off half the communities, bread and butter, what they're fans of.
It's interesting, right? Because then, I think for Disney, they're not really concerned with previous fans. I think they're concerned with getting new people on board with the franchise. Because they want to get the 5-year-old to see the movie so that in 10 years, right, they'll see the next trilogy. Right? And so that's where... I mean, Disney has done so many terrible things in their life in terms of being a corporation.
Yes. 100%.
Right. But it's also, you know, lazy storytelling and all that stuff. But they are not interested. I'm not giving them a pass, right? I'm criticizing them for it. They're not interested in appeasing 50-year-olds. They're interested in appeasing 5-year-olds, so they'll get the plushie, right? Because that's where they're making their money.
Yeah.
So Disney's doing it that way, which is an inherently shitty way, I think. But that's what their MO is.
Disney is really very strange. Like Star Wars is a fantastic case. Like, they pissed off all of the fans by decanonizing decades of lore that people really loved and followed, and they went, why? Like, even EA keeps that stuff. Like, what the fuck? But then Disney clearly doesn't care about the older fans, but also listens to them when Force Awakens or like Last Jedi or a director got into a lot of heat. They went, oh well, we'll just fire this director. It's like, wait, you don't care about the older fans, so what do you care what they're talking about? You just want 5-year-olds to watch your movies, and then 20 years when you remake Force Awakens, they'll go watch it again.
Yeah. Or they make, you know, the Mandalorian or the next mini series or whatever.
Yeah, and like, it's so funny. Disney is so weird with its mainline properties. Like, Mandalorian got away with a lot of stuff, and everyone likes Mandalorian. But the mainline series is Disney being like, no, it has to be this way and has to do that. Corporate overlords.
I was gonna say, I think it's because the movie is so implicated in the corporate structure of Disney in a way that, like, the new streaming platform isn't, right? So they're like, movies in Disney have this explicit function in our environment, right? So, like, there's a ton of Star Wars stuff at Disney World that my sister went and saw, and it was all really cool. She shared photos with me, and I'm like, I want to ride this. I did not watch any of the series, right? But I want to go to Disney World to go do those rides because they look really fun and innovative and cool, right? They want kids to ask their parents for tickets to Disney World. They are willing to lose money on a film if that means they can get more money elsewhere.
Can I interject here? Because I feel like this is the salient place to make this point. What's really interesting is to think about this in relationship with the Defenders series, right? Disney, Marvel, going out, making all these huge films, don't take any risk. They really aren't taking a lot of risks on the film franchises to the point where the Defenders pop up. And then they release Daredevil, and it's dark, and it's brooding, and it takes its time with its characters. I mean, you can decide whether it's good or not for yourself, but the critical reception was, this is excellent. Jessica Jones gets released, same thing. Luke Cage gets released, same thing, and they screwed it with Iron.
I'm so sad with Iron Fist. Iron Fist is like, I read a whole like run of it and all of the offshoots of the run from like the mid 2000s, and I loved Iron Fist, and I would defend him. And then I saw it coming out, and I'm like, this is gonna be, I might actually watch this. And then I was like, oh, the fight choreography's garbage. I'm like, how do you make a kung fu superhero have terrible fight choreography?
And the fight choreography in the other Defenders series is really good. So, like, what happened here?
But one of the things, well, like, talking about, like, getting people into the park and movies doing that, I would like to question, or perhaps pose a question, what does Avatar Land signal for Disney?
That, to them, it's like, we need another ride in Animal Kingdom.
They made a whole thing, that like a whole land of Avatar. And I'm like, why?
That's brought in a lot of money, so it's gonna bring in money again.
Well, yeah, you would think, but also like if their goal is to make properties to get people in the park, you would think that they'd be like, here's a new Avatar movie. Also, Disney park.
James Cameron working on another Avatar movie that's gonna take.
There's supposed to be 5 of them. There's supposed to be 5 of them.
Yeah, what the hell?
All of them, like half of them got canceled in the consolidation with Fox.
Really? Oh,
yeah, like there's supposed to be an Avatar 2, and that's still in production. And there's certain things that Fox was doing that is still in production. COVID hit right after the merger, so a lot of those projects got dropped just as a fact. Thank God the Gambit movie with Channing Tatum never came out.
What, you don't want to see Magic Mike as Gambit?
You know, Channing Tatum is an attractive dude. he cannot do a Cajun accent, and if you can't do a Cajun accent, you can't do Gambit. That is my rule. You have to have the almost incoherent Cajun accent to pull off Gambit.
I want superhero movies that are bad. Like I didn't see Justice League. I want movies that aren't boring. I want ones that are bad. Like I want
Justice
Daredevil.
League is excitedly boring because it's just enough Zack Snyder to be like, what the fuck's going on, but also enough of Joss Whedon to just such a jarring experience. We did a pre-release at my student theater of Justice League, and it was packed. Our capacity for that room was 476, and we had 476 people in that room, and it was fantastic because we had a lot of people who would cheer when like Wonder Woman, like everyone when they first came on, they're like, "Yeah, Flash!" And I'm like, you guys know the creators aren't here. Like, you don't have to clap because they're not here. Like, okay. It was terrible. It was awful. It was garbage. I love it. It was such a fun viewing experience. And it was just entertaining enough that I didn't fall asleep during it.
Right, I said a little earlier, right? It's bringing back film as spectacle, and I mean that in a bad way, but also a good way. And that you do have those affective experiences where it's more about the community of people watching the film than it is the film itself, which is bad in some ways, but is also good in some ways for people that want those kinds of affective experiences.
Yeah, and I went to a movie theater. I went and saw.
You went to a movie theater? That's kind of fantastic.
I went to a Marcus. I watched Kong versus Godzilla, which has some of the best fight cinematography I have ever seen. It is fantastic. Like, go and watch it for the monster scenes, because they're so well directed. Like, I was watching it, and in the movie theater while I was watching it, like, wow, that's a nice shot. Like, ooh, wow, I like what you did with that. Like, I was the whole thing, but I specifically went to the theater so I could spend money at a movie theater and be like, please stay open. I know your industry is slowly but surely dying, but half my money. Because I love movie theaters for that reason, where you're sitting, you're just in a 7.1 surround sound. It's way too loud because projectionists put the movies way too loud all the time on a 42-foot screen, and you just want to watch a movie. I want to go watch Mortal Kombat because it's going to be silly.
But are you gonna watch the original Mortal Kombat movie?
Oh, I've watched
Mortal Kombat as like.
I don't think I could
exercise?
I want to bring my husband, Eli, to it. Like, I want to convince him. Like, he's like, okay, we can go see it. I don't think he'd watch the original Mortal Kombat because he's not really into the camp of the 90s. I'm a connoisseur of campy, cheesy 90s movies. I watch Blade. I love Blade. That is the pinnacle of cheesy 90 campy movies. Eli doesn't want to.
Spawn is pretty up there too on.
The Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie is campy as hell. It is so good.
My favorite. Okay, I will say this with relative ease. My favorite Disney movie is the 1990s version of Three Musketeers with Kiefer Sutherland and Martin Sheen and Charlie Sheen. It's campy, and I really like it. I grew up with it. It's a very
Brandy Cinderella, very campy 90s movie. So
we were
good.
reading. I can't remember what the damn book is for Michael Newman's class from last, or I think it is this week. I'm just bad with book titles, I guess.
Oh, The Clinger.
Yeah, The Clinger, and he brings up Shakespeare in Love in the first chapter. And for a movie that at the time was like, wow. It is the most campy. I don't know if you guys have seen Shakespeare in Love.
I've seen parts of it, yeah.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
It's my mom has a thing for terrible rom-coms. She doesn't watch like Hallmark rom-coms. She watches like theater released rom-coms. So they're slightly above Hallmark rom-coms. Not by much. So I know like that campiness is great. Camp.
So it is 6:03. So
this was only supposed to be an hour, wasn't it?
I know it was only supposed to go till 5, and I had 6 videos queued up, and we only watched 3 of them, which is great. And this is awesome because now I can steal all of the work you guys put in and write about it. So there was.
Hey, we better be in the acknowledgments.
Yes, there was a conference. The Tampere University or Tampere University had a monstrosity conference, and games I like submitted but didn't get accepted. But then I was an attendee for a couple of their things, and there was one where it was like a professor who was guiding somebody for their master's thesis was like presenting with them, and I'm like, shouldn't the student just present this? Anyway,
shouldn't you be like I feel like
it might be
doctoral?
it might be a different style over there too, because that's in Finland, so it's possible just like the way that people do things there might be different. But anyway, I will put you in the acknowledgements of my book.
So what do you say to, if we're ending up the stream, rating the NYU Game Center?
Sure. I need to learn how to do that.
So I can just activate it from Raid Channel whenever you're ready. The NYU Game Center is currently doing some kind of talk, and we aren't like affiliated with them in any meaningful way, but we run in the same circles, so I figure why not?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's raid them.
Yeah. All right.
Let's do a raid. Thank you.
Do it on your end, Ren.
I will.
Thanks everyone for joining this fun little stupid little stream.
Next week, this will just turn into watching YouTube videos and talking.
That's Serious Play is a podcast now.
Well, plot twist. I'm writing about podcasts on Twitch, so
there you go. Perfect.
All right. All right. Bye, everyone. Thanks, Rukingo. Bye.
Oh, hi, Ruki.
All right.
Y'all, I had a podcast with the Game Detectives. I'm going to make a Serious Play podcast.
Did you end the stream? Is the stream in?
It is now.
Okay. All right, the raid. I think the raid has gone off. If I am correct.
Whenever I was reading about raids, it's like make sure you turn off the Twitch stream after you raid.
Should I turn mine off now?